Much to my lack of surprise, Yaginuma refused to lend us a squad car, so Yayoi and I had to take the train to Kichiki Hospital.
すごい人混みでしたね。
Yayoi was astonished by what she saw every step of the way, a classic country folk reaction.
ちょうど会社の就業の時間と重なったからね。
Felt like midnight because the sun set so early in winter, but in actuality it wasn't even 6 p.m. So much had happened the last 2 days that just a single day felt endless. The parking lot was deserted, and there were no outpatients in sight.
ここが黒谷の親戚の方の病院ですか。
黒谷の親戚というのであれば、
おばあちゃんのお姉さんの息子さんのお嫁さんの妹さんの息子さんが今こちらで院長されているんですよね。
I think the current director is my grandma's sister's son's wife's sister's son.
多分ね。
Yeah, sure. I have the energy to mentally verify that information.
今そのおばあちゃんのお姉さんのお孫さんが中にいるだろうから。今の自分が数えた順番をたどってみなさい。
I ended up bumping into Kohara before I found Masaki.
山之内先生。
あら、時坂さん、こんばんは。
Kohara cocked her head when she saw Yayoi.
はあ、今は気にしないでください。
今は眠っています。点滴を行っていますので。
精神ですか。
ええ。精神科医によるカウンセリングなどを予定していますが。
すみません。よろしくお願いします。
あと、鳥居さんのご両親に連絡が取れない件は。
彼女はもともと孤児だったようですから。
そんな見捨てられたとおっしゃるのですか？
わかりません。
That was all I could say. It was clear her parents weren't home either way.
ここの入院費用はこちらで持ちますから。
それを心配しているのではありませんが。
その点は問題ありませんよ。
I lied on the spot. By all rights, we should have been issuing a search for Tori's parents ASAP, but I needed to speak to her beforehand.
それで、まさきはいますか？
ええ、今は食堂で夕飯をいただいていると思いますが。
What does he think this is, a paid vacation?
あれ、時坂さん。
It was right then that Masaki returned, with Michiro clinging to his arm for some reason.
懐かれてるな。
はあ。それでどうかしましたか？
お前に客だよ。
Pointed at Yayoi.
客？
ひながみあやとさんですか？
Yayoi, that's Michiro you're asking.
うん。
I fucking love Michiro. Like, yep, that's me. Michiro
いや
nodded.
違うだろ
じゃあこっちの人が？
ひながみあやとです。
Masaki introduced himself.
私しぐさやよいって言います。
やよい。あ、
覚えていてくれましたか？
生まれたばかりの頃と、それから終戦直後に
Okay,
少
so
し
she
だ
was
け
a baby even back then when he was a young man. Okay, so yeah, no, her age makes a bit more sense now. Not that she would remember any of that, obviously. Regardless, what had possessed her to believe, even for a second, that a girl about her age would be Ayato.
ひながみ？
Ichiro shot Masaki a confused look. A natural reaction,
こ
really.
いつは訳あって名前が2つあるんだよ。
I explained it instead. However, she sounded like she couldn't have cared less.
どうして東京にいるんだい？
そうでした。大旦那様の病状が悪化しまして。
じいさんが？
既得だそうだ。ひながみ製薬はあの状態だし、親父さんも戻れそうにない。
ですが、自分はもう。
Masaki shook his head.
そんな。
お前がひながみを継ごうが決別しようがどちらでもいいけどな。
それは確かに。
Masaki hung his head.
俺も調べたいことがあって、もう一度あっちへ行こうと思ってたから。
自分を出しにするつもりですか？
そう言うなよ。俺はついでについていくだけだから。
わかりましたよ。
Masaki snorted.
よし。今からすぐ上野へ向かえば、
もう行くんですか？
距離もあるし、急いだ方がいいだろう。
True.
でも準備とかは。
富山で乗り換えの時にでも揃えればいいさ。弥生さんはそれで大丈夫ですか？
はい、見つけたらすぐに戻るように言われていますから。
じゃあ行くか。
Swell.
いってらっしゃい。
Michiro waved us
Michiro.
off.
お土産は何がいい？
蜃気楼？
持ってこれるわけないだろ。
We arrived in Hitogata after a full day of travel.
2回目とはいえ、さすがに準備もなしに来ると疲れるな。
I stretched my limbs once we got off the bus.
だから言ったじゃないですか。
すぐ来ないとお前の決心が鈍ると思ったんだよ。
そもそもろくに決心もしてませんでしたが。
Masaki picked up his bag.
お前はきちんと実家に泊まれよ。
分かってますよ。
The disgruntled Masaki
弥
nodded.
生さんは神社かな？
はい。あの石段登るの面倒なんですけどね。
送っていった方がいいかな。
大丈夫ですよ。慣れてますし。
Yayoi chuckled.
お前はさっさと実家戻って挨拶してこいよ。
分かってますよ。
Masaki, beefed at my prodding, started making his way to the Hinagami estate.
じゃあ私もこれで失礼します。おやすみなさい。
ああ、気をつけて。明日そちらへも伺うかもしれないから。
わかりました。
Yayoi bowed and followed Masaki down the snow-laden road. Guess I'll head for the inn. I didn't have a reservation. I couldn't imagine they were fully booked, or even had other customers for that matter. Masaki stopped in front of his family home and took stock of it. The path had been swept clear already, leaving no obstacles to the door. That said, the snow removal job looked far sloppier than usual, perhaps because Yuko was no longer with them. It also could have something to do with how the only ones left in the house were his grandmother and his dying grandfather, the former keeping vigil at the latter's side. Masaki took a deep breath and then stepped inside once his nerves were steeled.
ただいま戻りました。
He entered the living room and raised his voice. However, there was no response. The only sound was that of the crackling from the blazing hearth. Masaki knew everyone was probably in his grandfather's room. Still, he couldn't muster the resolve to go in there. Not right away, anyway. Thus, he instead lowered his back to the ground and sat by the unmanned fire. He took an iron kettle off the pot hook and poured its water into a tiny teapot before taking a teacup from the cupboard and brewing some tea.
俺にも入れてくれないか。
Oh, hey. I was gonna say uncle, but technically that's Pops. Masaki turned around to face the
おじ
voice.
さん。
Yuzo had emerged from Hidiomi's room.
早かったな。
God, I still hate that mustache, dude. He took a seat right next to Masaki. Oh my god. I just realized, like, earlier in the series, in the playthrough, right? I was like, wow, Yuzuru looks a lot more like adult Ayato than Shizuru does. And now we had this revelation. Jesus Christ, me. This oh, I almost said it again. Revelation. I was getting revelation and realization mixed up. Anyway, we had this revelation that, or not, it's not a revelation, but a working theory, a potential theory, right, that Yuzuru is the actual father, which makes a lot of sense now as to why they look so similar. That's very interesting. It was just me making a random comment. That's why I was suspecting Naori could be Ayato, because Ayato looked, or Naori could be Masaki, because Masaki looks so similar to Yuzuru. That's like the entire thing. But the whole thing was, it was still Ayato. I just had no way of possibly knowing that Yuzuru was his actual biological parent. That's theoretically. Allegedly, alright. Took a seat right next to Masaki.
ええ。弥生ちゃんに教えられてすぐこっちに来ましたから。
Masaki set a teacup before Yuzuru.
悪いな。
あの、じいさんの容体は？
ここ数日はもうほとんど意識がない。なんとか今まで持ってはいるが。
ここ数日ということは？
カレンのことは伝えていない。こちらでも東京からの電話で知らされただけで。
その電話は親父が？
まあ、こちらに来られないことを詫びていた。
Yuzuru sipped his tea.
ばあさんには知らせておいた。あの人も疲れが溜まっているようだから。
そうですか。
お前も疲れているだろう。今日はもう休め。
おじさんこそ疲れているんじゃないですか。夜の間は自分がじいさんを見ています。
そうか。
Yuzuru nodded.
具体的には何をすればいいんですか？
何か異常が見られたら知らせてくれるだけでいい。
わかりました。
Masuki got up and headed for Hideyomi's room. There he found his grandfather resting in a futon at the center. Hideyomi didn't so much as twitch. Masuki couldn't even tell if he was breathing. That was how eerily quiet the room was. Masuki sat by his grandfather's bedside and watched him sleep. He's gotten so old. Though Masuki had thought the same last month, seeing his grandfather so close to the end of his mortal coil really drove that point home. Back in the day, Hideyomi had struck spine-tingling terror into him. He'd ruled over the Hinagami family, no, all of Hitogata, with an iron fist. And yet here he was now, a paralyzed mass of skin and bones huddled under a tiny futon. The sight forced Masuki to acknowledge just how much time had passed, whether he liked it or not.
じいさん。悪いけど俺は。
Those words fell on deaf ears. Trudged through the snowy streets until I found myself back at the Futami Inn. Unfortunately, that is where I have to wrap this recording session up for tonight. But wow, lot of information, lot going down. There's definitely what I still don't understand, right, is why was Reiji's interactions with Yukiko necessary for the rest of the story to play out? That's what I don't understand. Because Yukiko ends up escaping from the Blessed Congregation after she sees Kohane's note. So that would speak more about her relationship with Kohane and not really anything to do with Reiji, right? Because like in the alternate ending, the ending that I originally got, she wouldn't have, we can assume that she wouldn't have escaped from the congregation, right? Weird, very weird. So I'm still curious to see how that comes into play. Very curious. Like, I feel like there's got to be something more as to why so much hinges on Reiji's interactions with her. Why a whole ending revolves around Reiji's interactions with her. And maybe by the time I finish this route, it'll make more sense. But as of right now, I don't see how any of this couldn't have played out otherwise. Why could not the rest of this have happened prior? That I just don't quite understand. But I suppose it's not for me to understand just yet then. But yeah, like I said, that is going to do it for this recording. It's either going to be a quick transition or a new video, but regardless, I'll see y'all in the next one. Until then, peace. What is up, everyone, and welcome back to some more of The Shell Part 2. In the previous recording session, we learned quite a lot. That's the thing, I've been sitting here trying to recall everything, and that's the thing, I am recording this just 2 days after the last recording session. Normally there'd be a bit more time, but I have a trip coming up, so I have to record a bit more ahead of time, but that's not important. That's the thing, it's only been 2 days since that last recording session, and I'm sitting here just trying to remember everything. Like, before I hit record, I was sitting here trying to like make sure I could remember everything in my head, and just more things kept popping up, like, oh right, that, oh right, that, oh right, that. We learned so much. A lot of information got dropped in the previous recording session, and yet there are still questions that need answers. It's wild. So, fucking off rip, let me try and think. What was the first thing we learned, right? We learned that Kohane, Yukiko, and Michiru were all orphans at the same orphanage. We learned that Yukiko had a brother that Kohane had a crush on. Something happened between them. We know that Yukiko's brother is labeled as deceased in the records. And then Kohane ended up snapping on Yukiko. Like, they managed to convince Yukiko to escape from the Blessed Congregation. Kohane did specifically by passing her that note. But then she got there, started interrogating her about the older brother. Yukiko didn't remember anything about the older brother. Kohane tried to assault Yukiko, but then luckily Toji and Yukari came in at the right time. But that was a wild turn of events. In another area over here, right, we learned that Karen absolutely is the killer, as I had suspected. Like, I had suspected Karen from the very beginning. For a while, I kind of suspected Nanako was involved as well, but my eye's always been on Karen. Always has been. I don't think Nanako is entirely innocent. I think she may not have a hand in any of the murder of Ayato's bridal candidates, but I don't think she's innocent. I think she and Naori are doing something for the Blessed Congregation, and they're up to some crooked work. I do believe that is the case. But yeah, no, we had hard confirmation that Karen is the killer. Reiji set a trap for her. She fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Her motives were exactly what we expected them to be. She got thrown in the slammer as of now. Both of the head honchos of the Blessed Congregation are dead. Oribe got stabbed, and then Utsuki apparently either there was a problem with his medication or he was poisoned, something like that. He wasn't physically assaulted, but there was something done to him. Oh god, and then what else? Right, we also learned that all of Ayato's bridal candidates are technically his sisters, because all of his bridal candidates were Shizuru's children. Well, technically not his sisters, because we also learned, I mean, this hasn't been hard confirmed yet, but Reiji theorized, and it made a lot of sense, that Yuzuru is Ayato's actual biological father, which was wild to learn about, because that was something I was pointing out way earlier on in the playthrough, back when I was still unsure of Masaki's true identity. I was sitting there thinking like, wow, Yuzuru looks a lot closer to Masaki than Shizuru does. That's why I was really thinking it was Naori for the longest time. But it turns out no. That certainly is Yuzuru's child, and it's still Ayato, which is fucking wild to think about. But then also, I didn't realize this in the previous recording session because I guess I didn't think too deep into it. But the fact that all of Ayato's bridal candidates were technically Shizuru's children meant that that whole friend group in Hitogata were all related to each other in one way or another. If Yuzuru was actually Ayato and Karen's father, that means Ayato and Karen were also technically siblings with Naori. And if Shizuru, since Yu and Meguri were bridal candidates, that meant their biological father would have to be Shizuru. If that's the case, that means Yu and Meguri are technically sisters, but also means they're also cousins to the other three. So that whole friend group is just all related. And they even know it. They didn't even know it. I mean, obviously, Ayato, Karen, and Naori, they knew they were related in some way because, their dads were brothers and whatnot. Or at least the people they believed to be their dads. But, there was no reason to believe that Yu and Meguri were related. And even Satsuki. Would you consider Satsuki into the mix? The original Satsuki, that is. Since she was meant to be the Oracle and lined up to be his bridal candidate. His very first bridal candidate. She was technically, related to him as well. That would have technically been his cousin. The original Satsuki would have been. We don't know anything else about the body double. There was a second one. We know that. It hasn't been outright confirmed yet, but we know that because after Inui found Satsuki's limbs, right, he confirmed the identity that was Satsuki Shigasa, but then he also made a comment on the fact that the Satsuki whose body had been found at the entryway to the shrine there was a virgin, which we know from Ayato's flashbacks that's not true. That, well, at least that's the Satsuki that Ayato slept with. There was a Satsuki that Ayato slept with. So we know that that Satsuki that was hanging up, at that altar wasn't the one he had slept with, because she was a virgin. She hadn't slept with anyone. So that in itself confirms that there's another one out there, which we assume to be this Ayako character, right? I'm very curious what her whereabouts are, and I'm very curious to see what her lineage is like. Like, is she just a body double, someone who looks very close to Satsuki? Or is she like Satsuki's twin in the same way that Ayato and Karen are twins? Or is... Because I want to, know if she shares blood with Ayato. Because if not, I gotta say, Ayato is beyond lucky, right? When he got that, fortune thing during their New Year's trip, and it said in romance he was going to be incredibly lucky, I'd say they were absolutely right, because somehow he managed, because if Ayako, this body double, does not have any blood relation to him, that would mean that somehow, by the grace of God, Ayato managed to successfully dodge through the fucking incestuous minefield that was the Hitogata dating scene over there, and managed to sleep with someone he didn't actually share blood with, which gotta give massive props to him for that, if true, right? Right, and then right now, Reiji and Masuki are in Hitogata because Kensei's daughter, Yayoi, came to find Masuki because the patriarch Hideyomi is in poor health. I think that's about where we left off. Kohane's in the hospital, hasn't come to yet. She's under surveillance. Masuki was originally keeping watch over her there, but then this whole situation with the grandfather popped up and he left. Yukiko is currently staying with Yukari at Reiji's house. Kyoko's still in the hospital. We didn't really see any progress on that case as to what happened to Kyoko. We still are kind of in the dark about that. Really didn't learn anything new there. Shizuru, he hasn't gone missing, but he's MIA. No one's really seen him. Well, Jesus, I said he's MIA. What the fuck do I think the M stands for? We haven't seen him, but he's still contacting people. He's still in communication with people, right? Because he managed to contact Hitogata and tell them he wouldn't be able to be there, and filled them in on the situation of what happened with Karen. At least I'm pretty sure that's what they said, is that Shizuru contacted them. I think that's about it. I think we're about all up to speed. I think so. There's still some questions that need answers. I think now we're focused more on the Blessed Congregation and trying to get answers there. Because now we've solved, essentially, who the murderer is behind Ayato's bridal candidates. But it's still very clear that the Blessed Congregation is up to something, right? Because Reiji didn't know about the group suicide at the orphanage, which Naori claims was his reason for, trying to help more children. And now we're trying to uncover more things about what happened at this orphanage, about what happened to Michiru and Yukiko and Kohane. Now our focus has shifted more onto them and less about what's going on with Ayato and his bridal candidates. Which also means that there is still... Ayato does still technically have a bridal candidate out there. Unfortunately, because technically Kohane is also one of Shizuru's children. So we'll see if they try to pull some weird shit like that. But yeah, I think that brings us up to speed. It only took me 10 minutes to recap all that. Good God, what the fuck? But that's the thing, it took me 10 minutes to recap all that. 10 minutes. because just so much happened in the last 6 hours. Every other recording session, I feel like there's like 2 or 3 major events that I can like sum up, like, yeah, here were the big moments that happened. But this time it's just like, no, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. That last recording session was jam-packed full of a lot of answers, also left a lot of questions, but just so much information. With all that being said, enough yapping, let's jump back into it, shall we? I trudged through the snowy streets until I found myself back at the Hutami Inn. The atmosphere of the settlement had already told me there were unlikely to be any guests.
悪いね。今日貸せる部屋はないよ。
And yet the elderly proprietress sprang that on me as soon as I asked to stay the night.
いやいや
Naturally, I was determined not to give in without a fight. I'd literally freeze to death if I couldn't stay there after all.
失礼な男だね。お客がいないから止められないんだよ。
Stripling? Stripling? What the fuck does that mean? Stripling. It means young man. I thought that was a verb. I thought she said he was doing something that was discourteous. No, she's calling him a discourteous young man. Okay.
なぜですか
部屋の掃除をしてないからさ。埃っぽい部屋を使わせるわけにはいかないよ。
Oh, that's a convenient excuse.
こちらはそれでも構いませんが
Hell, I'll clean the room myself. Oh, and my only other option was turning into a snow cone.
納屋でもいいのなら止められないことはないけどね。
What? That's supposed to be any cleaner? Or so I wished I had the guts to say anyway.
ちょっと、おばあちゃん。
Get her ass, you. You came running over just when it started to look like this Cold War would never end.
こんな時間に来ていただいたお客様を追い返すなんて。
どうも先日はお世話になりました
I greeted you.
時坂さんでしたか。いらっしゃいませ。
You bowed before turning back to Yoshie.
お一人様だったら奥のまで十分だから、そちらへ案内します。
勝手にしとくれ。飯は出ないからね。
Yoshie backed off, making no attempt to mask the irritation on her visage.
申し訳ありませんでした。
You got her on her hands and knees, bowing as she sincerely
い
apologized.
えこのような時間に飛び込みで来ることがご迷惑なのは分かっていますから
I took Yu's hand and helped her back up.
では、ご案内いたします。
The room in question was relatively clean and perfectly habitable, though I could have done without the biting chill. You filled the brazier with some charcoal.
申し訳ありません。お部屋が暖かくなるのには、かなり時間がかかってしまいまして。
ええ分かっています
I set down my bag, hung up my coat, and sat on a legless chair.
今、着替えとお布団をお持ちしますので。
あそれは後で構いません
I retrieved some photos from my bag and arranged them across the table.
これはお祭りですね。
You picked one up and looked it over.
戦前こちらに来ていらした朽木千鶴さんからお預かりしました
あの時のお祭りですね。
You stared longingly at the photos. Just then, her face suddenly fell.
おひな、カレンのことは。
存じてましたか
ええ、詳細はよく知りませんが。
You stared at a photo of herself, Karen, and Meguri.
おひなはそこまでリヒトのことが好きだったんですね。
Hey, yeah, I guess you could phrase it that way.
昔からそうだったんですか
Yeah.
そうですね。双子でしたし、一番長く兄様と一緒にいるんだって。
だからといって。
そうですね。
You nodded and flipped through the photos. Next was another shot of the
こ
festival.
の方のことをご存知ですか
I pointed Satsuki out.
ええ、さっちゃん、さつき
Sadie!
さんですよね。
God damn it.
綾人君
It's
の
been
許
so long
嫁
since
と
we've
聞い
had to
て
see
いま
that
した
name.
が
Sadie. Fuck you.
それは知っていたのですか？
知っていたというか、祖母などが話しているのを聞いただけです。お客様には粗相のないようにと、ひな神に腰入れされる方だと。
集落の人間にとってあくまでもひな神家に嫁ぐのはお客様という認識なんですか？
おっしゃっている意味がよくわかりませんが、ひな神家には代々お客様が嫁ぐことになっています。
Oh yeah, and since Satsuki here was, or at least the original Satsuki, was apparently one of Shizuru's children, that would mean she would also be sisters with you and Meguri. Like we got 3 sisters right here, and then another group of 3 siblings right here, and then these 3 are cousins with these 3. Real mishmash of family right there. So that's the perception of the matter, is it?
巫女が嫁ぐという発想はないのですか？
You shook your head.
考えたこともありませんでした。だってそれであるならば、私や巡りのところへ結婚の話が来るはずもありませんから。
なるほど。
She probably didn't think she and the Oracle had anything in common.
あら、
Suddenly you raised an eyebrow after setting her eyes on another photo.
何かありましたか？
この写真。
You pointed to a photo of the Oracle in profile at a dark place.
これは巫女ですか？
That's what they want you to think. Though hard to make out, her outfit was practically identical to the one Karen had worn.
この写真は
おそらく祭りの時だと思いますが。
That was what it seemed like from the rest of the photos anyway. And I totally called this from a mile away too. The fact that Chizuru's photos would somehow be like a key part in a certain point in the case.
さつきさんではありませんか。
That's what they want you to think.
そうですか。
Never met her myself, and the photo quality wasn't the best, so I couldn't tell. My curiosity piqued. I set the photos side by side with another one of Satsuki.
似ているような気はしますね。
They look alike, but do they look identical? Would have been easier if only I had another photo of her from the same angle. That said, Shizuru hadn't denied that Satsuki had been the Oracle, so I assumed it was all been given by this point. If that was true, then there wouldn't have been anything unusual about Satsuki performing the ceremonial dance to the Oracle.
おかしいです。
However, you seem to think
何
otherwise.
がおかしいのですか？
さつきさんがこの装束を着ることはできないはずです。
それは彼女が巫女ではないからですよね。
いえ、それだけではありません。
You interrupted.
この後、私たちはさつきさんと一緒に巫女の舞を見ていたんです。
つまり同じ時間にさつきさんが2人いたということですか？
In that case, did that mean Chizuru's film had been stolen to keep that a secret? And if so, had the theft been carried out by someone close to the Oracle, one who knew her secret?
だからおかしいと思います。何か思い違いをしているのかもしれませんが。
So there was a Satsuki with you and her friends, and then there was the Oracle. If I pieced together all the facts, then that meant the two of them were probably completely separate individuals. Right, see, I considered the twins angle, but for the longest time I've been on completely separate individuals.
全くの別人。巫女とさつきさんは無関係なのでしょうか？
And if that is the case, if they're not related, Ayato, hey, you didn't fuck a family member. Congrats, man. It still didn't end very well, but you know, take your wins where you can get them.
この写真では同じ人物に見えます。
Yeah, it's called a body double. You lay them side by side again.
確かによく似ていますが、よく似た人物を連れてきたとも考えられます。
Yes, sir.
さつきさんは巫女の影武者だとおっしゃるのですか？
Yes, sir.
その可能性は高いと思います。
でもそれならば私や巡りに結婚のお話が来たことの筋が通りません。
その時殺されたのがさつきさんではなく巫女だったとしたらどうでしょうか？
それは
You showed her
この
mouth.
前さつきさんの他に もう一人いたことは確かです。
証拠は
ええ。
Like that the deceased had been a virgin. Considering Masaki and Satsuki had made love, that didn't make any sense.
警察の司法解剖記録から隼人君が会っていた少女と遺体の少女は別人だという証明ができています。
では亡くなったのは本来の巫女。
そう考えればあなた方へ結婚の話がいったことの説明がつきます。
However, I also had evidence that Satsuki had been the oracle. So how was I to settle that paradox?
ではさつきさんは一体どこへ行ってしまったのですか？
問題はそこですね。彼女が巫女の影武者であったと仮定してもいなくなる理由がわかりません。
If anything, she should have taken over for the oracle after the latter's death. So then why didn't she? Was it because she was a Hinagami by birth? If so, it'd be impossible for them to be twins.
つかぬことをお聞きしますが、二見さんの血液型は？
A 型ですが。
そうです。
So she fit the criteria, just as I suspected. Still, I can't bring myself to take that line of inquiry any further, just as by asking her about her father. Yeah. Anyway, do you know who your biological father is? She's like, yeah, it's this person. Are you sure about that? Can I have a conversation with your mother real quick? Just a totally innocent conversation. Today was coming of age day. What the fuck does that mean? It's January 15th. Is that an actual thing? Coming of age day? Not that it was relevant to me in any way, shape, or form, mind. I already had my turn at it 10 years ago, and holidays didn't mean a damn when you were a detective anyway. If anything, they only gave me migraines, since they meant government offices were closed for the day. Well, obviously I already knew pissing and moaning about all this in the middle of nowhere wasn't going to do me any good. Shaking my head, I took stock of the crossroads near Hitogata's dead center. Before me was the staircase to Shigasa's shrine. To the right was the Hinagami estate. And to the left was the Kuroya clinic. Ultimately, I decided to have a chat with the Kuroyas first. They were probably the easiest ones to talk to, considering how abnormal the settlement was and all. I rang the doorbell and waited.
Oh yeah, あんたは確か。
The door opened to reveal So, the director of the clinic.
どうも。先日もお邪魔した時坂です。
ああ、そうだ、そうじゃった。いやー、年を取るとなかなか思い出せないことが多くなっての。まあ、ろくにおもてなしもできないが入りなさい。
失礼します。
I followed So inside. So escorted me to the reception room, where I took a seat at his urging.
せがれが往診に行ってるんで、わしゃ留守番だよ。
ひながみ秀臣さんのところですか。
うん。あやつも今回ばかりは厳しいようでな。夜年並みには勝てんよ。
So the guy who looked like he could run a marathon if he really wanted to. Yeah, no, I said it before. So's got that old man swag going for him. Like, he looks fine. Yuzuru, on the other hand, needs to shave that fucking mustache. See, So, he still got his mustache, but it's not off-putting. It's like, yeah, of course it's there.
あやつの容体について聞きに来たのかね。
いいえ、自分が知りたいのはもっと昔。
ああ、わしも最近はとんと物覚えが悪くなっていて
老人というのは得てして昔のことはよく覚えていると聞きますが。
まあそういうがの。
So sighed in defeat.
何が聞きたいのかね。
彼女がここにいた頃、健康診断などしませんでしたか。
それを見てどうするつもりかね。
ひながみ家に。いや、この集落に救うパラノイアを断ち切りたいんです。
パラノイアか。
So sighed.
戦争も終わり、今の新しい時代になっても、ひながみをはじめとしたこの集落の人間が古いしきたりにとらわれている感は否めない。秀臣が生きているうちに頼まれてくれるかね。
約束します。
Damn, that's quite the task, though. Can you put an end to it before Hideyomi passes? Like, you just told me the guy doesn't have much time left. Like, I'm not a miracle worker, man.
では、こちらへ来なさい。
So rose to his feet and headed for the door opposite me. I took a seat after he showed me to the examination room.
昔のカルテは確かこの辺りにあったはず。
So I began rifling through papers.
さつきさんはどのくらいこちらに滞在していたのですか？
数ヶ月じゃな。年末12月に仕草の人間が連れてきて、年が明けた3月に亡くなったからの。あった、これじゃ。
So handed me a file.
何か持病のようなものはありましたか？
そこまで詳しいことはここじゃわからんよ。ただ、せがれのやつが言っておったな。
これですか？
The sentence on the chart caught my eye. Exhibits symptoms of dependency.
部屋で独り言をつぶやいていることが多かったそうだ。それも鏡に向かい、自分自身と会話をしていた
But
ら
it
しい。
wouldn't just be her, would it?
精神分裂病の傾向とも言えますね。
せがれもそれを危惧しておった。
しかし実態は異なります。
Pointed to Satsuki's Shigesa's blood type.
AB 型じゃの。
さつきさんと思われる少女の遺体は A 型だったんですよ。遺伝子型を見ると AA 型。
So furrowed his brow.
さつきさんが2人いる可能性は他の証拠からも上がっています。
I showed So the photos from the
一
festival.
方は綾人くんたちと共にいて、もう一方は巫女の装束をまとっています。2人のさつきさんが舞台の上と下に分かれていた。二卵性のソーセージ。それならば血液型が異なっている可能性もありますが、
メンテルの法則だったかな。
ひながみりかさんの血液型は
そこまで分かっておるのならば、もはや答える必要もあるまい。
So heaved a weary
黒
sigh.
谷壮さん。
わしは医者だからな。己の本分を超えたところにあることは知らぬよ。
医者の本分。ひながみ家の血縁についてはご存知だと考えても、
So didn't answer.
おそらく AA 型の殺されたさつきさんはしずるさんとりかさんの娘で、彼女こそが巫女と呼ばれる存在なのでしょう。そして綾人くんとカレンさんはりかさんとゆずるさんの間にできた。ただし今判明した AB 型のさつきさん、彼女がわかりません。
The Shigesa family were predominantly type Bs, so perhaps she had been one of them. Fortunately, finding her was probably the only way of clarifying that theory.
わしゃ何も言わんよ。
So shrugged.
仕草のじいさまが死に、今は秀臣も危ないとなりゃ、パラノイアとやらを断ち切るにゃ、わしがこのまま墓場まで持ち込むのが一番だと思わんかね。
その意見には同意したいところですが、自分はどうしても救いたい人がいるんですよ。
ひな神の個性があれかね。
あれはどうでもいいんです。救われたいならば自分で何とかしろと言いますから。
それはいい。
それができない、今はどこにいるかもわからない女性がいるでしょう。その存在すら定かではなかった AB 型のさつきさんが。
It more or less cleared up where the type AA Satsuki had come from. However, the other one was a completely different story.
あいにくと心当たりはない。
So shook his head. He wore the face of someone speaking true, a man trying to hide something.
メンデルの法則なんぞ、ついぞ忘れておったからの。
それは嘘ですね。
どうしてそう思うかね。
先ほどさつきさんが2人いる可能性を解いたとき、さほど驚かなかった。医者ならば血液型の際にはすぐに気づくはずです。それを伏せたことはひな神や仕草に対するものもあるのでしょうが、
Turning a blind eye had probably been the smart move for him, considering all the bloodlines involved. All hell would have broken loose if it ever gotten out that the heir to the Hinagami family had, in fact, been sired by the son who'd married into the Kuroyas.
買いかぶりすぎじゃよ。
So shrugged.
ひな神の血は受け継がれておるし、黒屋の血も治りに受け継がれておる。
そうですね。
Agreeing with him was all I could do at the moment. It was very unlikely that the Hinagami family bloodline, that was to say, blood founded purely upon incestuous marriage, would pass to another generation in accordance with their bizarre customs. Wouldn't that spell the end of the obsessions then?
秀臣のやつを楽にしてやってくれ。あやつはずっと苦しんできておるからな。
わかりました。
Oh, will I? What the fuck is plaguing Hideyomi's mind? His big... That's what I don't understand. Like, so it's like how his biggest regret is all this obsession with the bloodlines and whatnot. Like, what the fuck can we do to ease his mind then? What the fuck do we as Reiji have the power to do to set his mind at ease? What answer is Hideyomi looking for? Or are we supposed to be like, Aito, go up to your granddad and tell him you won't fuck someone who's technically your sister and or cousin? Like, is that what we need to do to set his mind at ease? And he'll be like, oh, thank God. Like, what powers do we have and?